future. Well, Matt, welcome to Tour on Air.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
We'll start with a question on WordPress. I'm sure you've told the story way too often, but to our audience, how did it all get started? And why do you think it ended up being the leading CMS system in the world that powers a third of all the top 10 million websites around?
Sure. Well, WordPress got started because myself and others wanted a better system. That was really it. I got started blogging probably in 2001 or 2002, and was just, I guess, a little frustrated with the software at the time. It felt clunky, hard to use, and wanted something a bit easier. So that's why I started contributing to WordPress. It was based on a previous open source project that kind of extended. Actually, its roots were in Europe. So the project it was based on was out of Corsica, France. And my co-founder for WordPress, Mike Little, was in the UK. So it had always been a bit international. Why it took off, I think, was that the world needed an open source version of a content management system. There were plenty at the time, but none that combined kind of the flexibility and power that you get from open source, how communities can come together and really build. We have over 60,000 plugins and themes that can transform WordPress into e-commerce, into a community site, into like a Facebook-like site, transform it into anything, combined with the easy use. And because my background was more, call it, sorry about that.
No worries.
My background that's my mom. Come on.
Take her in.
That would be cool. My background's more art and music and things like that. And a lot of the initial users of WordPress were artists and musicians and writers. We always focused on the easy use and just trying to make sure it was accessible to as many people as possible. And that's where we got our mission, which was our mission then, it's still our mission today, which is to democratize publishing. So I fully expect to spend the rest of my life on this. I've been doing it 17 years now. And I hope I can.
You age well, if I might say.
What was that?
You age well, if I may say.
Oh, thank you.
Or maybe it's the professional camera setup. You have literally
it's this
clearest image. It is so sharp. We'll talk about that also.
I'm actually working on a blog post about that. So check out my blog soon, ma.tt. But from those, I'll talk about the three main phases of WordPress as well. So in the beginning, it was just about blogging. And that was, online journals, diaries, and people still use it like that. I still use it like that. I just point you to my blog. And that's still important. But then WordPress evolved to be a full content management system, which means instead of just powering one part of your website, it would power the entire thing. And that's been really how WordPress grew to power now over 35% of all websites, and which is more than 10 times the number 2 in the market. The third wave, which probably started in 2013 for us, 2014, was people really using WordPress as a development platform, as a platform to build something that didn't really look like a content website at all. And so people use WordPress to power applications. They use it in a headless fashion or a decoupled fashion to power like React applications or mobile apps. And then when you look at platforms like WooCommerce, which is also one of our products, which are now doing north of $10 billion of sales per year, going through this open source WooCommerce system. That's almost like its own complete application. But when you build an application like WooCommerce on top of WordPress, you get security, user systems, distribution, all that kind of for free, which is how WooCommerce grew to be bigger than Magento, which was like a big multi-$100 million competitor in just a couple of years, really, like 2 or 3 years, which is not really common in the e-commerce space.
And then you decided to build Automatic. And I guess maybe for the not so technical savvy among our audience, maybe you can describe how that works, like to use an open source code or organization and then build these type of applications on top that you do with Automatic. Maybe give us some examples. And also how the early learnings from building WordPress sort of has led into what you're building with Automatic now.
Sure. So why I love open source software and why it's my life's work to try to get to be more open source software in the world is open source comes with like a constitution or like a bill of rights where it enables certain freedoms. The freedom to use the software for any purpose, the freedom to see how the software works, the freedom to modify the software, and the freedom to distribute those modifications. So when you combine these 4 freedoms, it is really the only thing that gives us true agency in the digital world. Otherwise, we're at the, you know how we all click through those giant terms of service and all those things when you install software? That's basically a list of all the ways your freedom is being taken away. And we all just click through it, right? That's kind of the world we live in. We trade a lot of freedom for convenience, but you don't have to. And in fact, if you're building software, I would encourage you to build open source software because you want to bring more freedom and agency into the world, not less. So one of those freedoms is you can sell the software. You could sell WordPress if you wanted. And so I created this company, Automatic, to sell both WordPress and add-ons to WordPress to essentially fund the development. So I wanted a place that myself and others could be paid to work on open source full time. So today at Automatic, we're about 1,200 people. And prior to the acquisition of Tumblr, I would say like pretty much everyone was working on something that was open source or contributing to open source or the code was actually released. So like, just giving you an example, WordPress.com, you visit, it's a commercial website, right? Like you can sign up for plans, you can buy things, you can, like we A/B test pricing and different stuff. That's all in an open source repository on GitHub. So you can see our pricing test, our localization systems, our new sign up that we're launching and testing out to 5% of users. Like all of that's 100% open source, even though it's commercial and it's kind of, in some ways, only we're using it. That's okay. We open source it anyway. So with Automatic now, we essentially have a few main businesses. We sell subscriptions to basically things that enhance WordPress, whether that's us hosting it or you host it on GoDaddy or Amazon or whatever, and you run Jetpack. WooCommerce subscriptions, like those are things that kind of enhance your WordPress. 2, we have an enterprise business, which is one of the fastest growing. This allows basically people spending anywhere from 30 grand to millions of dollars per year to run WordPress in a really high performant way. So it's super secure, it's bulletproof, it can scale to any amount of traffic. This is how Facebook uses WordPress. It's how New York Post uses WordPress, like a lot of these really large sites. And then we have the commerce business, which I talked about WooCommerce. And then finally, we have an advertising business, which is our smallest and newest, but on a social network like Tumblr, or we have a program that allows WordPress users to show ads. We have some ads. So across those 4 business lines, that's how Automatic makes money. And we try to put as much of it back into the ecosystem.
And you mentioned you have over 1,000 team members working with you at Automatic, and they're all distributed. So maybe let's talk about,
especially right now, that's true of everyone.
True. The difference between what you consider remote, which I guess is still very prevalent in terms of language when we talk about remote work, and what you're building, which is a truly distributed company.
Give me 1 second, just because I'm going to turn off this echo.
Sure.
All right, back. Could you repeat the question?
Yeah, sure, no worries. The way that you built Automatic, right? It goes beyond building a company with flexibility around remote work, which is, I guess, what many companies would offer. You build a truly fully distributed company. What are the differences and why are you doing it?
Yeah, so I have this framework I talk about. I call it the 5 levels of autonomy. And the autonomy is how much you, as a person working for a company, how much time do you have to design your day and really choose the way in which you produce the work. It doesn't change the work you produce. Like if you need to talk to a certain number of customers or design this screen or whatever it is, you still have to do that. But how you get from A to B is totally up to you. Essentially, your company's trusting you to be an adult and decide the best ways that you want to produce that. Now, most companies, though, are still kind of run in a way that's not unlike like a factory would be run, right? Like for widgets to be built in the factory, like people need to be at a certain point on the line at certain times. You all have to be there at the same time. You all have to be in the same building. And even though in tech, we obviously, we're working online, so we don't have to physically touch the same thing. We still would have people come into these offices and say that the only way you could brainstorm is if we all were standing in front of the same like physical whiteboard that could write on it. And obviously the technology enables so much more. Look what we're doing right now. We have hundreds of people here, like all talking in real time. Actually, I don't even know where you are. Where are you in the world?
Berlin.
See, there you go. You're in Berlin. I'm in Houston, Texas. And yet we're having this real-time amazing conversation. So when companies, I think, move up to give their employees more autonomy, they get better work because the employees can be more creative. They can be more, kind of bring their best selves and choose the way in which they work best. Some people work well in the morning. Some people work well at night. Some people work well when it's 80 degrees. Some people work well when it's 65. I guess I should translate that in Celsius. Hopefully someone can do that in the comments. You can choose that. Maybe you want your pets there. Maybe your pets, someone else in the office would be allergic to. So you can kind of design your own perfect workplace and how and when and where you work. The company to allow this needs to allow more asynchronous work. So what I like at Automatic is we try to question every meeting, not have a meeting unless there's really a really good reason for it, and try to make them rare and special. Like a special occasion. You should look
that
forward
people
to
look forward to them. Actually, they're so rare.
I try to make it that if there's a meeting on my calendar, I'm really looking forward to it because there's something that I think can only happen at that meeting that I wouldn't be able to accomplish another way.
And give us an example, like speaking of meetings, because I read that you kind of reversed the way that you justify meetings. A meeting has to literally be justified to take place rather than justifying why it would be okay to not take place and maybe be dealt with in an email. So what would be some examples?
This is me personally versus the whole company. I'm sure there's people at the company who would love a daily meeting. So, and depending on which team you're on, it might be different. But for me personally, it was actually, by the way, this is a pendulum swing for myself as well. Like I got to a point last year where I just felt like I was probably in meetings the majority of my week. And it was harder for me to do some of that was external, like we were fundraising. So that I can't help. If you're a CEO, you got to do that.
Sure.
But for the internal ones, I felt like I wasn't contributing the most I could to the company, And ultimately, my job is not to be in meetings. It's to have the company be as successful as possible serving our customers, And so that's the ultimate way. And so just sort of started to look at, was there a different way I could contribute with my unique talents or way of working to that goal? And where I ended up, like today, I actually have a fair number of meetings after this. But it's because I wanted to connect one-on-one with a few folks in the company who are senior. We're going to talk about the largest problem they're facing right now. So we kind of have that as a way to do it. We probably haven't checked in maybe 4 or 5 weeks, maybe 6. So it's good to catch up just in general. Also, like we kind of miss other humans. So it's a little less structured than many of my meetings might be, partially because I just want to connect with these folks. Like I personally miss them. I really like the people I work with. So I just kind of want to spend a little bit of time with them. And that's explicit. We're just saying like, hey, this is part of the purpose of this meeting is also just to spend some time together, which by the way, is a valid reason. Sure. Just be explicit about it versus like assuming. So check out the post as well, point you to the blog. It's 5 levels of autonomy on ma.tt. I spell out kind of every single level. Most companies in the world right now are at level 2, where they're just taking what they're doing in the office and trying to do it online. And if you can move to level 3, 4, and 5, you'll find that you unlock just a lot of the latent talent that's in your company. The power of introverts who aren't going to speak up in those meetings, but have a ton of creativity and valuable things to contribute. These are what you can bring to it.
And for sort of more asynchronous work, and for you as manager and leader of the company to have maybe less face time than other managers would typically have. How do you need more processes in place? And how, for example, do you go about measuring performance, decision-making, brainstormings? Is there a certain phase also in product development where you feel it is actually good to all sit together and meet, and in others it's maybe more about execution and everybody working more autonomously?
Yeah, I mean, I used to think so. I used to think like, oh, for brainstorming or making roadmaps, we need to get together. By the way, it's worth mentioning as well that prior to COVID, we would try to get people together in person 3 or 4 weeks out of the year. Once for the whole company coming together, and a few times for the individual teams. I think my current latest, May 6th version of this is that the getting together in person is fun. And it's worthwhile for that. It's great to hang out with smart, intelligent, creative people passionate about the same things that you are. That's probably why you host your events, right? But for actually producing the work that we do for our customers, which is, we're saying at this point, like, we don't produce physical products really, not needed. Like, all of the brainstorming, all the road mapping, all of the getting people on the same page, all the creative going back and forth. There's some digital tool which gets you the same benefit, but what the digital tool can't get you is you and I, like, clinking a beer and me putting my arm around your shoulder and saying, thank you so much for those great questions you asked. Like, that's something that we're not going to be able to do here, that I'd love to do, but just different.
And would you say you hire for certain people that are more conducive to that type of work environment, or you think it could be for anybody, or is it maybe something that maybe extroverted people who get their energy by being with other people would not strive under as much?
Yeah, we have a ton of extroverts at Automatic. I'm not personally one of them, but I would say that the key is, and we've gotten more explicit about this, is that, if you used to get, or if you're used to getting some of your social connection, putting the arm around the shoulder of someone and like hanging out from work, you just need to find a different place for that. And that's not a bad thing, right? You can still have very strong connections to your colleagues, but maybe have someplace like, join a sports team or volunteer at an organization in your town, or go to a bar, or, visit your friends. You just can be explicit about building those social connections. And I think that's actually a bit better, because you're not just doing that with people who happen to be hired by the same company as you. You get to choose, like, who are my 10 favorite people in the city, and how do I spend more time with them? By the way, maybe we go to lunch together. Maybe we, check out a matinee, because I don't need to be at work from 2 to 4 p.m. Do you have that in Europe, like movies in the afternoon?
Is this a sort of all-in decision? You had that type of situation, and then with the acquisition of Tumblr, I read you somewhat became a more hybrid organization, because you also acquired an office in New York with 200 plus people. What are the learnings you've had from integrating a different culture into your larger organization?
It made it so real. So, because I've been talking about distributed work for a long time, I would advise companies, for example, to if you have meetings in person, make sure that they're well documented, so that the people who aren't there feel included. Or, if you're doing like a big presentation to the company, don't have like everyone in the room and then just like a camera in the corner, right? That's not a good experience. Unless you have like amazing AV setup, it's not a good experience for the people who aren't there physically. And so with Tumblr, even before COVID, when they were still in the office, they shifted to doing their kind of weekly all hands on video, where everyone was on a screen like this, sort of one voice, one mic, one screen. And it got much higher quality for both the people in the office, who maybe if they were sitting in the back had trouble hearing or seeing, but also the people who were remote felt much more included. So those are the things that we would encourage companies that had that hybrid. But the other thing I would encourage is just to have the office be closed for a day or two a week. So, everyone who was in the office would develop the empathy for not being in the office. Well, that happened in a way that none of us would have anticipated, where basically all offices are closed for every day of the week. And I, to try to look for bright spots in a very tragic situation, I would say one thing is that we've all developed empathy for what it's like to work from home, which is sometimes good, sometimes challenging, but always you appreciate when people go the extra mile to make sure you're included, right? And a lot of that inclusion is why we design systems the way we do it automatic. So for example, one thing that's a little bit different about us is we don't really use any email inside the company. Everything that would normally be on email, like coordinating on projects or talking about things, sharing financials, whatever that is, all happens on internal blogs that are open and transparent to the world or inside the company.
Mm-hmm.
And those,
including the goals of individual teams, individual people.
Pretty much everything. Yeah. Unless it's like a critical HR issue, we do try to follow like praise in public, criticize in private, but like unless it's like a sensitive HR thing, it's on one of the P2s. And that's all there. It's just all there. And
the famous P2,
because, the CFO can post how the result of our April numbers per business, and anyone, a support person, engineer, anyone could look at that and say, hey, I noticed this number is up a lot or down a lot, and ask the question. And that can happen asynchronously, right? So it doesn't require the CFO in Utah and the engineer in London to be online at the same time and talking at the same time. And then anyone else who had that question gets the benefit of seeing that answer. So it's almost like, I think of our internal, we call them P2, because that's the name of the kind of WordPress system that it's built on. And you can see that at p2theme.com. Well, someone put a link in the chat, thank you. It's almost like an internal Wikipedia, because every time we post on this, it's contributing to the institutional knowledge of the company. And we become wiser and wiser over time, because there's these, at this point, millions, tens of millions of words being written about how the company and all of our products were created. And you can go back and see exactly how something happened, whether it was 2 weeks ago or 12 years ago, which is just really, really powerful. We don't have to read the wheel over and over again.
Yeah, it reminds me in one aspect a little bit of, I used to work at Amazon and we had the Wiki. And I remember that's to this day one of the most impressive things about my experience at Amazon was that everything was on the Wiki and it was very self-service. I remember my first day, I got a computer and I was like, how do I install email? Like, what's the server? It's on the Wiki. And I would keep on just hearing it's on the Wiki. Just check the Wiki. It's all on the Wiki. A challenge we had was to keep the hygiene of that information. Is that a responsibility of everybody? Do you alternate between people sort of taking care of the crucial and most up-to-date information?
Yeah, I think you just have to use it. So a lot of times, I love what GitLab says, actually, which is another great distributed organization. They say it's not a process unless it's in the field guide. So unless it's there, you don't have to do it. So if you want to change a process, change the field guide first, and then we'll change what we're doing. So that ensures that it's being used, which helps for the hygiene of it. The other reason I feel like wikis and other things can get kind of out of hand is, one, I don't think wiki software is the best for this. Like, if you're using Wiki for this, consider switching to WordPress, right? WordPress plus Pages gives you, you still get the infinite version control and everything like that. It's just much easier to use for people to edit a WordPress page. And you get the benefits of like the Gutenberg blocks. You can have a really clean structure with subpages and pages. So you can have hierarchies and just use all the tools that you would build in building a website internally. So build an internal WordPress, I guess, is one of my messages. And two, people put things in there that are more time-stamped, so they're more ephemeral, and that belongs really on an internal blog, right? Like, it doesn't matter to me that there's, at this point, probably 100,000 or 500,000 P2 posts, because they're time-stamped. And if I want to go back and look at the thing from 2017, I can, but it's not like mixed up with every other page and the current information. So that's just something we figured out on websites like a decade ago. You want some stuff time-stamped and some stuff more permanent.
And I read that you found out that you underinvested in growth and training for a while, and sort of put more emphasis on that. How did you realize that, and how do you now go about it and also measure sort of the progress?
Yeah, I think actually one of the things was we assumed that the growth and training needed to happen in person. So we were making that same mistake that I talked about earlier. I was like, we'll get everyone in a room and we'll get a teacher there and we'll do these cohorts. You know, I think that's the single most important thing that any company could invest in. It's getting better, right? Like I tell the team that, you know, we're 1,200 people. If we can make the company 10% more efficient, that's the equivalent of hiring 120 people. So if we could take 3 days and have everyone take a class together and get more efficient, wow, like that's incredible. And Automatic also, when companies get to level 3 or 4 of autonomy for a distributed organization, you typically have much higher retention. So there's a lot of people at the company I've been working with for 10 or 15 years now. If you have higher retention, you definitely want to invest in training because people are going to be around a long time. And you don't get that learning from switching jobs. So you need to get the learning from like challenging yourself and being challenged by the organization. So, you know, this again is something that might have seemed weird a few months ago, but now guess what? Everyone's children are learning online and everyone's taking online classes. And a ton of these online universities have opened up and made their courses free. And like, so there's so much that's going on. We find what helps is one, having some accountability with colleagues. So doing things together with people online, but it just kind of helps than doing it solo. And then also just having some discussion groups and stuff. So think of the things in the class that you might get. Maybe we all learn something and we come together to talk about it. You can still do that. You know, maybe do it once for people in the US and once for people in Europe, so people aren't up in the middle of the night. But like, you can still create some cohorts there and try to do it. We also tried to make it more asynchronous. So, you know, at our meetups, we'd have speakers. We still have speakers. It's just, as you probably noticed, way easier to get someone to come and speak to a camera than it is to get them to fly.
You are proof.
I'm proof of it,
of this, Matt. I've been hunting you down for a few years to come to Berlin.
How long have you been trying to get me to TOA? It's been, how long has the conference been going on, actually?
We are in our 8th year.
Yeah, I feel like it's been a good chunk of those years.
Yes.
And it's gotten bigger every year. The email that I get from you is like, now we're 15,000 or whatever it is. And I'm like, wow, this thing's huge. I should really go to it.
I'm like, what's his number?
Right? The deal is getting sweeter and sweeter. It just was a scheduling thing.
Sure.
As the company's gotten larger, I'm just honestly doing fewer external talks.
Of course.
But something like this is not hard to work into the day. So it's a pleasure to be able to connect with, you know, all the people that are here and talk about these things, because I am passionate about this. It just, I've got 1,200 people that I have to talk to a lot as well.
So we got 2 more questions on sort of distributed work before we talk a few final questions on tech entrepreneurship and your learnings in that space in general. Who is this for? When you look at tech companies, is this really for any company? And how would you suggest, you gave one example already, you know, half a day at home per week. Any other pointers on how to just get started?
I think it's for almost everyone, especially in technology or knowledge. If a big part of your day is sitting at a computer, you can do that anywhere. Just think about that. And if your big part of your day is also doing things in between sitting at a computer, you could probably do that on your computer instead. Exceptions would be, you know, somewhat obvious, like physical security, anything. If you're in healthcare, like if you're doing surgery, like all those sorts of things right now, we don't have like great telepresence for. But, you know, I think it was last year, I was at dinner with the CEO of Goldman Sachs, which is a huge company in like 120 countries. I forget how many employees, probably like 80,000. And we were talking about this very, very thing. He was very curious about it. He's like, wow, that sounds really cool. I just don't think we could do it. And then on the news, like a few weeks ago, I saw Goldman Sachs is now 98% working from home. You know, there's 65,000 people. They've gotten like all but a couple hundred, which are probably doing like physical security or maybe like racking servers or stuff like that. Sure. All are working from home right now. And literally just a few months ago, he told me it was impossible. So try it. I mean, we're all trying it. So that's almost trite to say, but like, since you're doing it,
trust is a big piece here. If I remember conversations with friends of mine who worked at Goldman Sachs, especially in the first years, they would say oftentimes they just were at the office till late at night because everybody was, and they kind of had to show that they're just there and available, even though they didn't really have work anymore.
Yeah. There's so much unhappiness in the world that I think comes from us, the performative aspects of work.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the things that don't make a Goldman Sachs client any happier, that
Sure.
someone feels like they need to be at work a few extra hours because they're their bosses or something like that. Like, ultimately what matters is, are you accomplishing the task at hand? And how much lost productivity, how much lost family time, how much just general, you know, waste in the world came from the performative aspects of work. So let's just clear all that out and use this as an opportunity to say, the work is really important, but all the things around the work, let's not be a cargo cult about that. Let's not take that for granted and really re-examine if there's a different way to accomplish the same task more efficiently.
Yep. So let's move to some learnings in tech entrepreneurship. I read that also much of what you have been implementing now with the culture at Automatic derived from being inspired by Daniel Pink's book Drive, where he talks about sort of the concept of mastery, purpose, and autonomy. Can you walk us through how that book shaped your view on work culture?
Yeah. I'll say that, and then I'll say a few other authors I recommend everyone check out, because there's probably like 5 authors that are the reason Automatic works like it does today. So Daniel Pink in the book Drive talks about a framework called mastery, autonomy, and purpose as being the primary motivators to people's happiness and satisfaction in life, really, not just at work, but as work as a part of life. And mastery is the idea of being challenged. Are you learning new things, and are you being challenged by it? And think of this like if you've learned a new sport, whether recently or when you were young, you know, the first time you get on those skis, it's kind of miserable. But as you get better, there's a real joy from like being on the edge of your competence and learning something new. I'm always looking for opportunities in my life to learn something new. And I always try to remind myself that for that period, while it sucks, it's going to get much better later. There's more reward later. And the harder it is, sometimes the bigger the reward. Autonomy is a lot of what we've been talking about today. You know, do you have the ability to design your life and how you work, accomplish things, to get things done? And to illustrate this, let's talk about the opposite. So imagine being horribly micromanaged, where someone was like watching everything you do and telling you exactly how to do it, in a way that was not really contributing to long-term learning or a better outcome. So that's autonomy. And then finally, purpose. And purpose is, are you working for something bigger than yourself? Is it more than just a paycheck? And there's, I think, almost infinite types of purpose in the world. And I see incredible beauty in every type of job. And a lot of what we do in Automatic is like the plumbing of the internet. It's not glamorous. You won't know most of the sites you visit are powered by WordPress, but it's important the same way that like real plumbing is important, or the person who picks up the trash, or like provides any of the millions of services that enable like daily life to go on. These are super important. And you know, we work on a tech version of that, and I'm very proud of it. You know, even though it's, you know, some things are glamorous, but a lot of what we do is not. The other authors, so, you know, check out Daniel Pink's other books. He's a brilliant writer. A few of the other authors that have been super influential to me, I'd say 37 Signals folks, so David Heinemeier Hansson and Jason Fried, who were also early pioneers in this distributed work, and have written some really good books about it, including about like meetings and this stuff. So I think a recent one is It Doesn't Have to Be Crazy at Work, or Remote. Just check them out. They're easy reads. I would highly recommend Dan Ariely. He's a behavioral economist. So think of this as the intersection between psychology, microeconomics, and macroeconomics. And it's just very interesting to learn how things that we take for granted in the business world, like cash bonuses, actually can be a demotivator. And there's tons of research which has been reproduced all around the world in different cultures that like show that these things actually lead to suboptimal work outcomes. So why are we all doing them? Like, there is research around getting better work. So check that out. And then finally, there's a great author called Nassim Nicholas Taleb, whose most famous book is called The Black Swan, but also has written Fooled by Randomness. What are some other ones?
Skin in the Game,
Anti-Fragile,
like a few great books.
Man, and he's one of these people who's, by all means, I haven't met him personally, but just from Twitter, he seems like a strongly opinionated person who might be like difficult to get along with.
Yeah.
But he's still brilliant, and his writing is really just so fantastic. And so I would start at the beginning of his books, I think Fooled by Randomness, and just start working my way through them.
Definitely, highly recommend. Always controversial or contrarian in view.
But also, he correctly predicted like the 2008 crash, COVID type stuff. Like what's happening in our world more and more frequently is very similar to what he writes about in a theoretical term. So if you can sort of prepare your company, Anti-Fragile was a really good one, prepare your company for these types of edge or tail events, you can be resilient to whatever might happen, which by definition, we're not going to predict what the next thing exactly is. It's not going to look like the last thing. And that's part of, for example, why we built a distributed company, is if there were, imagine something that would normally affect a company with an office. Let's say a meteor hit, right? If you happen to be where that meteor hits, everything stops. But when you have people in, gosh, I think we're in 400 cities now, 500 cities, like things keep going.
And while you're recommending books, what tools, productivity hacks do you have? I hear Slack is something of, I don't know if you still use it, but last time I thought you saw sort of benefit, but also challenges with the platform. Can you walk us a little bit through your personal tech stack also that you use to stay productive?
Yeah, so check out the P2 theme. That's really key for us as a company. And it's open source and free. So we're going to try to make that easier to productize later in the year. But right now, you can download it, run it on any place you can run WordPress. We do use Slack for chat, but I've been really excited about this new project that's open source out of Europe, actually, from a company called New Vector, which is called Matrix. Basically like an open source, distributed, federated, encrypted version of Slack. Imagine like the best of WhatsApp meets the best of Slack. And so we're going to start to try to use that a lot more. And gosh, what's else in our stack? Zoom. Although we're starting to use like Google Meets more. Yeah, you kind of want something for this, like video and audio. You want something for real-time ephemeral chat. That could be IRC, it could be New Vector, it could be whatever. And you want something for asynchronous. And a lot of people use email for that today, and there's just better stuff than email. So try to get away from email. And finally, you want that Wikipedia, that field guide, that thing that like is for permanent documentation. And for that, you can use any CMS, but if you like this talk, check out WordPress.
And I also read for asynchronous conversation, and I thought that was a really interesting point you made. You see benefits in voice messages because often you feel that text can maybe be read into in a sort of more controversial or confrontational way than maybe the text was actually meant when it was written in a fast way. Maybe it came from your boss and you read it in a different way than if you were to hear his or her voice.
It's a really common thing on Automatic where you end up typing back and forth and it's almost like a Twitter thread that's escalating and you're like, wait a second, we're not actually mad at each other and we might actually agree with each other more than we think. So let's just, you heard the quote, dancing about architecture, right? Like you don't want to use the incorrect medium to express an opinion about something. So right now, this is one thing I don't love about Slack is it's really hard to send short voicemail back and forth where it's easy on Telegram or WhatsApp or anything else. So I'd love to incorporate that. But it's very common on internal blogs where people record a quick screencast and talk over it or take screenshots or make a quick movie. It's just a way to like better illustrate what's going on. And then when you record that, people can watch it asynchronously. By the way, they can also watch it sped up. How cool is that? What might take 8 minutes to say normally, you could get through in 6 minutes or 5 minutes because you're watching it sped up and still get the exact same information. So it's another place you can unlock efficiency.
2 more questions from myself, and then we go into audience questions. One is a question I love asking founders because it seems to me, based on conversations I've had with many other founders, whether they're early stage or later stage founders, successful or not successful, is that question of when do you pivot further, iterate further, because you are on that mission and you want to sort of provide the product to the idea that you have envisioned. And when is it better to move on and maybe completely pivot or abandon a product, an idea, a mission? Have you faced that question yourself, and any pointers on how to deal with it?
All the time. And because we create a lot of new products as well. In fact, we have a section of the company that their only job is create new things, right? Going from 0 to 1. One, do you like it yourself? So is it, it's been interesting how often that a product that's also not picking up with the wider public is also something that I find myself not really loving using. So like, you're working on it all day. Do you have a way to incorporate it into your life? And this only works for like a section of things, which you can also use. Like if you were making Sarbanes-Oxley software for like Fortune 500, maybe it doesn't work. But for many things, you can find that first user. And can you find, even if it's a small audience, are they passionate about that? Hayden Shaw has this question he likes to ask, where if this service went away, if WordPress went away, how much would that impact your life? How much would you care, essentially? And he looks for people who say, like, that would be a big deal. Versus for some other services, like, we can all think of the thing that we'd use instead. If WhatsApp went away, I'd use Telegram. It'd be fine. It wouldn't be that big a deal. So I like WhatsApp. I use it quite a bit. But I'm actually not, like, that deeply attached to it as some other things in my life. If my, actually my iPhone went away, I'd use an Android, so that's not that bad. But if like Mac OS went away, that I'd have to retool my entire system of working. So that would probably be a pain in the butt. And so I'd probably say like, I would be very distressed if that happened. So look for that small passionate user. Every successful complex system, I think this is called Gauss' law. Every successful complex system was a simple system that worked first, that then expanded. You don't create something really complex and have it be successful. You have to start with that simpler thing and then build on top of it. I think of product development a lot as being accretive, where like you kind of put layer and layer and layer, or like making a croissant. It's like you really have to start with one and then build on top of it. So start with that simple thing that a few people love, and then add on more.
And then lastly, I also saw in some book recommendations you gave on other blogs, you're interested in meditation, in consciousness. How do you keep sort of mental health hygiene, especially when you work from home? How does your day look like? Are there some things, some rituals that you do to just keep sane?
Yeah, I'd say more recently, but in the past 5 or 6 years, meditation has become a really big part of that. And if you zoom out, like if you're an alien, meditation is weird, right? Like I'm going to sit there and do nothing for anywhere from 10 minutes to an hour a day. And that's going to make me smarter or better at the rest of the stuff. It doesn't make any sense in a lot of ways. But it really does work. So it's one of those things that I would encourage people to explore. And I had to try like 20 things before I found a form of meditation that I could stick to. And it actually ended up being an app that I invested in called Calm, that I invested in before I even meditated myself. And I was like, okay, if I invest in this, is there angel around? Maybe I'll use it. Yeah. And there was something about the app, I put it on my home screen. I would change the Twitter icon. I would move the Twitter icon and put the Calm icon where the Twitter icon used to be. So I'd like accidentally click it sometimes. So I would just kind of try to hack myself to do it. And then it started working. And actually, these days, I actually did a class where I was meditating like an hour a day. And wow, profound, like really, really powerful. I learned a lot and experienced a lot through that. And then reading, for me, and by the way, this works for me. Some people might learn from listening or other things. I just had this amazing neuroscientist called Adam Gazzali on my podcast, which you can see at distributed.blog. And it was funny. He was like, yeah, for your brain to work well, you need a couple of things. You need to exercise, because our brain exists in a body. It's not like, in a jar someplace. So your body has to be, it has to have some movement and some things. It's like some form of meditation or stillness to kind of get past your default mode network, essentially. There's a neuroscience explanation for it. And then, you look for a purpose. And if you get those three things, it's interesting. It's always three things. You can actually get a lot done. And my biggest fight now, I'd say just fighting modernity. There's so many apps and so many smart people trying to distract me with tweets or ads or all these sorts of things. I guess if I'm going to give a hack there, I like Pomodoro timers, which is basically just this concept that you start a timer for 25 minutes and then you take a 5-minute break. So I'll use Pomodoro timers when I have to get through something that's like a grind. Like I have to review these 150 HR things or something. And so I'll just set the timer, work for 25 minutes, and then literally step away for 5 minutes, look at a tree, I get in a hammock. It's a good time of year. I do some push-ups or a little bit of movement, and then just get right back into it. The breaks really, really help. I also use it for distractions. So if I go on Twitter, I set a timer and I say, all right, this timer is done. I'm stopping no matter what, even if I'm in the middle of the coolest thread ever. So for my guilty pleasures as well, I try to set those timers.
Thanks for sharing, Matt. So let's go into some audience questions. We have 8 minutes left. I want to also let you go on time. First one up, how do you keep employees motivated working remotely?
I would say go back to the framework we talked about, Mastery, Autonomy, and Purpose, and then also read the entire book. There's more in there. I think if you can speak to the why of the work and really dive into that purpose, it can be extremely motivating for people. Think about that. Also think about how you can remove the things that might be damaging the mastery, autonomy, and purpose. So, are there micro interactions or things about how you work, which is actually demotivating to people? And sometimes just removing those demotivators. By the way, you can ask people what they are. Like it's the 5 hours of expense reports they have to do every month. It's like sitting in meetings they don't want to be in. It's like, just ask them and they'll tell you. So you can eliminate those. And actually you'd be amazed how far you can get just by removing the bad stuff before you even get to adding on good things.
Artyom asks, how is your weekly meeting structure, or how does it look like? One-to-one, one-to-many? Do you use a special format structure for meetings? Do you use any tools to run more productive meetings?
I'm going to answer this for me personally. So I'll say inside the company, there's all of the above. So there's daily stand-ups, there's weekly meetings, there's everything. For me in my role, I found for this scale of company and for where we're at, I like to have as much as my week unstructured as possible. So periodically, it's been a month or two, so I'm going into some of these one-on-ones. But really trying to create as much space as possible that allows me to jump in a call, on a dime with someone, or spend lots of time on these P2s, reading and interacting with the products, or jumping into customer support, or using the product myself, or writing, or reading, or all these sorts of things I find can add more to the value of the company than it would if I were doing the things that I thought I had to do as a CEO every day.
TV asked, and I think we've touched only briefly what TV's asking, how do you ideate new products in a distributed remote environment?
Just try different stuff, I think that's one of the coolest things about Automattic is that people are very open-minded. So there's many, many different methods of creating ideas. One that we've tried to some success before is called game storming. So just Google for that, game like G-A-M-E, their brainstorm, game storming. It's just a methodology. And for all these methodologies, whether they're designed to be in person or remotely, kind of read about them, see what sounds cool about it, and then figure out a way to do it via video, or using Mural or Figma or InVision or a shared Google Doc, or having someone drawing on a piece of paper with a webcam pointed at it. Like, there's a million ways. Have paper and hold it up. You can recreate the act of drawing or writing or leaving and coming back together. Like, all these things are possible to recreate online. Just try to apply your creativity to designing it. If we can do yoga
question
online,
around favorite tools. You asked, you answered already. Zach is asking, how important is having technology or not having technology at in-person meetings? For example, Apple has a strict no laptop policy to avoid distractions.
Good question. When I am personally in an in-person meeting, I always try to have a notebook, like with a pen and paper. So if I need to write something down or I want to take some notes, it doesn't look like I'm checking my phone, right? Because when we see this, even if I was just writing a note, our mental kind of model is that person is distracted. Because also, it's like rolling the dice. I might get a message that then takes my mind space, or see a notification or something that just takes me out of being present at that meeting. And then it wastes the meeting. If I'm not present, why are we there? So that's what I try to do in person. I also generally always have like notepads, Post-its things, and I'm writing all the time. So I guess on video, it might look like I'm doing this, but that's just easier for me to not be pulled out of things. But that said, I don't have a no laptop policy. If we're going to look at a screen together, let's just pull that up. And I generally try to put the laptop so we can both see it and we can both type on it and stuff like that. There's nothing wrong with that.
Juries is asking, can you please speak more about accountability and doing work together?
If you don't have accountability, the whole thing breaks down. But I think that's true in an office as well as distributed work. But in distributed, when you get to that level 3 or level 4 autonomy with the asynchronicity, right, where everyone's working asynchronous, it's really reliance on, if I send something over to you, knowing that I don't need to keep it in the back of my brain to check on it. It's almost like if you imagine a physical network, like if there was a router that was dropping a lot of packets, that would degrade the performance of the entire thing. So every person in your organization's like a network switch, and they just can't drop packets. And it's amazing. I'll talk about another book that I really liked, called The 4 Agreements. There's actually a sequel called The 5th Agreement, which you could read, just like an expansion of it. And the first agreement is be impeccable with your word. Basically, this means like, if you say something, be impeccable with it. Write it down, make sure you follow up, and or communicate. I always say, like, it's fine. By the way, it's going to happen all the time that you can't do something, but tell the person that's expecting it that you can't do it, and say, hey, this thing I said I was going to get to on Friday, it's going to be next Friday. That's okay. That happens all the time. But if it's Monday and they haven't heard from you, that then creates this it breaks down trust, it slows the organization down, and it just makes everyone a lot less efficient. So you really want to communicate as much as possible. So think about that. Be impeccable with your word. And if you want to explore that more, check out the book.
And then lastly, I'm going to combine 2 questions in one. Jay is asking, have you ever considered a micropayment infrastructure for people to contribute to creators? What is your take on feasibility? And Zach asks, how do you see Tumblr evolving now that you own it?
I like that you paired those. You obviously know what we're doing. You know our roadmap. So we've talked about this publicly, and we've started launching a number of these payments systems on WordPress.com that allow for simple one-time payments or recurring payments. And actually, we just launched where you can gate different content. So at a Gutenberg block level, you could say, to access this content, you need to be a subscriber to the site at a certain level. We would love to roll, I think we said publicly as well, we want to roll this out for Tumblr as well. Tumblr has millions of amazing creators that are making music, comics, photography, so much art, that kind of like a Patreon, we'd love just to integrate a way for people to be able to support it and for them to be able to connect with people in a different way. It's not we're going to build this on normal payments infrastructure. It's not going to use like crypto or anything like that. I just think that normal payment infrastructure is getting a lot better, and at scale, we can make things like credit cards work really well. We have millions of saved credit cards already. We have hundreds of millions of user accounts. So we can just kind of create a very low friction way for people to support creators. And because we're an infrastructure company, we don't need to take 5 or 10% of it. We can just take like a normal payments fee and build the whole thing, right? Because we're also a subscription company. So for people who pay us the $50 a year, $100 a year, we don't need to charge extra on every single payment. So that's what we're working on, and I hope to have more to announce and launch there soon. But if you check out the WordPress.com blog, you'll see some of these features already live.
Matt, and then lastly, what is your tech setup for doing these video calls? I also read you invest into that, and I'm still impressed by, we've had a few of those, and it's such a sharp image. What's the webcam you use? What mic do you use? I'm sure you've tried a lot.
Yeah, so I'll tell you what I'm using right now is I have a Sony A7R Mark IV hooked up to a G Master 16-35 lens at 2.8 aperture, which I think I have at about 24 right now. I actually set up a teleprompter setup with an iPad. So I'm looking at your video right now, kind of reflected on the screen, and the lens is behind it, which allows me to kind of engage directly with the camera. And as you realize, I was running a little bit late today because like my Amazon Basics tripod and the teleprompter, which is really heavy, like kind of like were not working well, and I had trouble configuring it. So sorry for running a few minutes late. So normally I'd have an audio setup. I have a shotgun mic on the camera, or like I might have like an MKH416 pointed at me. But actually right now the audio is just coming through the MacBook 16. So I just have that kind of close to me. So that allows me to both hear you, so I don't need to have headphones on, and I'm talking through it. And they made some really cool improvements on the 16 where it actually sounds pretty good. I would say in some ways just as good as like this other system. The problem with the external mic is that then I also have to wear earphones because otherwise you get the echo, where the MacBook does some magic where it doesn't do that. So that is the system I'm coming to you from today. There's also a Keylight Air from Elgato, and the camera's feeding into a Camlink 4K, which is basically converts a HDMI signal to a webcam. So,
okay,
and it's going to be a long week about this literally today. So this is like my latest setup that I've been playing with, and so I'm going to put a link to all the stuff I just said on there.
I got out my game. Thanks so much, Matt. Thanks for joining. It's been a pleasure. All the best.
And hope to see you in Berlin.
Yes, I hope so. Best wishes to Texas.
Cheers.
Bye, man.
Bye-bye. And AI and Crisp AI.
Yes, Crisp AI is being recommended also on your blog, right?